Hello, my name is Chuck Wolf. Over the years, I've worked in many different roles, including leading my own leadership consulting company since 1994. I've worked for and with some of the best companies and universities in the world, and have had the opportunity to work with government officials, military organizations, and public and private schools. I'm a leading expert and pioneer in emotional intelligence. Since 2009, I have been a volunteer hosting a radio show I created called The Emotion Roadmap: Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I really enjoy making a difference in people's lives. The show is on award-winning community radio station WPKN in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In recent years, Simsbury Community Television has been sharing my shows on their station and on YouTube. My sincere hope is that everyone who watches regularly will learn how to use the Emotion Roadmap in their own lives by listening to people who call in to get help with challenges at work, home, and in communities. To learn more, go to www.emotionroadmap.com. If you have a comment or question, email me at cjwolf@cjwolf.com. Thank you and enjoy the show. And this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And you're part of the community strip here on WPKN. You just listened to the announcements, and I'm Messiah, and I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. We're going to be talking today about a few different things. I always come in with a few topics. Those of you who are regular listeners, I want to thank you all for tuning in. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I'm on the first and second Wednesdays of the month, 12 to 1 p.m. On the first and second Wednesdays of each month. And I just really enjoy the opportunity to engage with the community and hopefully be helpful to you. Again, the show's the Emotion Roadmap: Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. And what that means, for those of you that might be new to the show, is that there's a science out there called emotional intelligence that has given us some information that can make our lives better, and given us some information that can help us to help others who we care about or who we just want to help make their lives better. And that is caught up in the scientific model that has been created by President of Yale University, Peter Salovey, and his colleague, Jack Mayer, University of New Hampshire professor of psychology. The two of them in the 1990s investigated this idea that we have emotional abilities and that we have differences in these abilities, kind of like having differences in mathematical abilities or verbal abilities. And those differences matter. They asked me in the late 1990s to help them to come up with a way to make this new knowledge and information useful. And so I created what I call the Emotion Roadmap. The idea, if you're not feeling something that is helpful, or someone you know is struggling with their feelings and not sure what to feel, or at least feeling uncertain and doubtful, and whatever it is that they are feeling is not helpful to what they're trying to achieve or what you're trying to achieve, then you can actually change your feelings. You can plan how to change your feelings, and that's what the show's about. So if you're new and you're just listening for the first time, then the show is about helping you. In case you're stuck, in case you're one of the very many smart listeners that listen to WPKN and to our show, my show, on the first and second Wednesdays of each month at 12 noon for 1 hour, then if you're stuck and uncertain and doubtful, if you just feel as though the feelings you have are causing you to feel like you're drowning, and you're really, really upset about whatever it is that's happening in your life, and you have no clear outlet or way to proceed, then you can call. And you can call, and as I listen to you talk about your situation, your circumstance, what you're struggling with, I walk you through this emotion roadmap. I ask you, what is it you're feeling? Why are you feeling that way? What's it about? After a brief description of your circumstance and your feeling, I ask you, what might be ideal to feel? I ask, is there anybody else that's key to what you're trying to get done? Is he or she or they involved? What might they be feeling? And what would be ideal for them to feel? And then we work through, how do you get there? So the idea of a roadmap, as you know, is simply to get you from one place to another. Well, I decided that this would be a really good title for the work I was doing with Peter Salovey and Jack Mayer to help understand how to use emotions and emotional intelligence more effectively. So people call in about situations at work. People call in about situations at home. Sometimes situations involving just themselves, because a lot of times the conflict we experience, the uncertainty and doubt we might be feeling, don't really have to do with others. It's more about ourselves trying to make a decision. On the other hand, sometimes it's very much to do with relationships with other people. Someone that works for us, if we're a leader, someone we work for, if we're a team member in an organization where we report to one or more individuals. Sometimes it's a peer, a teammate, a team worker that we work with, a neighbor, someone in our community, in a group we belong to, where we disagree and we haven't found a constructive way to handle that disagreement. All those things are potential for what we talk about on the show. And for those of you that have been waiting to call, let me give you the number. Those of you that are regular listeners and want to talk to me, the number to call is 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. So I've introduced you to the show. If you're just tuning in, again, the show is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. I'm Chuck Wolf. I'm considered an expert in this world of emotional intelligence, and I want to share that expertise with all of you in our community as one of the many volunteer programmers who are here. And I've got a caller. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who am I talking to, please? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello, Chuck.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks very much, Chuck. It's Doug McLeod with Sandy Hook Promise.
Oh,
How
hi.
are you doing today?
I'm good, Doug. I recognize your name. I'm very hesitant to say names, but it's nice to talk to you, Doug. How are you doing?
Nice to talk to you. Just very quickly, we ran this weekend a race in Guilford. It was in benefit to locking up firearms with the song "Strong Foundation," and I know that people in crisis, sometimes have suicidal ideations, and I just wanted you to speak to how talking can maybe get people through that period of crisis. Obviously, firearms can lead to dreadful outcomes. They usually do when people are in crisis. That's why we advocate and why Ethan's Law has been so successful in terms of locking firearms away from people who are in crisis. And red flag laws are important in terms of temporarily removing firearms from people who are a danger to themselves or other. But can you just speak to the efficacy of talking to somebody else or reaching out? Because so often people who take their lives don't show any signs. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But the real tragedy is when people can get help, but they don't feel like there's any hope anymore. And so talking can sometimes get people through that crisis, very often through that crisis. And I'll take the answer off the air. Well,
Doug, before you go, is there, because I don't know, does Sandy Hook Promise offer some opportunities for people to talk with counselors?
Well, they do. What the Sandy Hook Promise does, their focus is on prevention, preventing gun violence in schools. And, as Mark Barden said on your show, I think probably 2 years ago now, it's their interventions are all about giving students, children, at various age groups, the agency, to say something if they see something. Very often, as all parents know, the kids know before the parents do, or before the teachers do, that someone, a friend perhaps, is threatening to hurt themselves or others, through social media or something of that sort. So what Sandy Hook has developed is a an app that goes on all the phones of students in schools that are participating in these programs free of charge to the community, and then that message will be go to a triage center in Florida, and then immediately assessed for the threat level, so that somebody who is and very often what's happened in the past when somebody is called 911 is police or responders or guidance counselors, teachers have not known what to do with that information. Now there are protocols for what to do with that information, which would include speaking to the child in question, and assessing the threat level or the risk level. So that's what Sandy Hook does. And it begins with programs in primary school called Start with Hello to address social isolation, which is very effective. They have clubs, which again are run by the students themselves. Again, reinforcing the agency that students have. The Save Promise clubs, can be delivered various times and in various ways during the school year. Generally with some supervision from maybe a school counselor, and then there's Say Something program. Say Something Week happens in September, and it's a national program that goes out to, I think, probably over 3,000 schools now participating. So there is that, but that's their focus at Sandy Hook is prevention through talking and early intervention rather than all the harm that can be done after the fact to the community and to schools if there's a live shooter situation. So anyway, that's
Doug, thank you for sharing that. The reason I asked was because I did have Mark on, and it was a lovely program, and I was quite proud of it, and I'm glad to be able to share any information about Sandy Hook. I would like to just ask you to think about something too, and then I'll go on and talk about what you asked me to talk about. One of the things that's happening in recent times is that there seems to be a pushback against social and emotional learning in schools, and as Sandy Hook Promise. Having originated with the horrific event in the school, there's a lot that they've done that they make available as a nonprofit to schools around the world to help out with all these issues that reflect on people's ability to cope and to have fruitful, effective lives that deal with all kinds of emotional circumstances. And they do it, out of love and out of a dedication to making something happen positive out of that horrible event. And they do it really well. And they have great references and recommendations from people who experience it. But recently, there's been a pushback against social and emotional learning. And I think it's confused. It's confused for a number of reasons. I think partly it's people who are worried about some of the things being taught in schools. I think there's some pushback against some of the teacher unions who didn't want to go back into schools and all the problems that have originated in schools with remote learning. And I think if there's somebody in Sandy Hook, the reason I'm asking you this, Doug, that wants to talk about that with me, about why it's so important to have social and emotional learning in schools, understands what this pushback is about, and wants to address it. Because I think in today's world, more than ever before, social emotional learning is absolutely a critical competency that everyone, not just in schools, but everyone, everywhere. And if we learn it in schools as kids, it's easier to learn when we're younger. So I just think that there's a pushback coming. And if there's some people that are engaged in trying to address that in Sandy Hook, if you know anybody out there, Doug, that's interesting.
No, I certainly do, and that's a great project for the summertime is to get that work in place so that you can do a show on social emotional learning, because these are life lessons, right, that we carry through us throughout, because we're all going to have ups and downs. That's guaranteed. I remember there was a book that I read probably 30 years ago, and it was by a guy named Dr. Peck, who said, I think the first line in it was, the moment that we know, I'm paraphrasing, the moment that we realize that it's going to be difficult, it gets a whole lot easier, right? So we can expect the difficulties, and if we have the emotional learning to address those, then things can be processed normally. So I'll speak with my friends at Promise House up in Newtown, and we'll be in touch. But I'll certainly take the answer off the air about talking about just those deep feelings. It's something that we all need to do more of. For big and small things. Thanks very much. It's good to talk to you. All the best.
You too, Doug. Thank you. Take care now. Bye-bye. So just to Doug's comment, first I want to be very clear. I'm not an expert in dealing with suicide, but there are people out there that are. And one of the things I'd like to have available is the Suicide Hotline number. So let me give you that and then talk a little bit about my own thoughts about it. So the Suicide Prevention Hotline and website, the hotline is 800-800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. The actual website is https://suicidepreventionlifeline.org. No spaces. Suicidepreventionlifeline.org. And if anybody's dealing with this, I encourage you to talk to experts about that. But one of the things that I want to say about, I do want to comment a little bit about it myself. So when Doug asked me to say, well, what's the value in talking about it? There's tremendous value in talking about it with someone that can help you. Sometimes we talk to someone we're close with who doesn't know how to help us. And their value might be minimal. But they may at least be able to point us, and that anyone can do this, to the people that are expert in helping people cope with suicidal feelings, which are not at all unusual, by the way. The numbers of people in schools, but not just in schools, across the nation, across the world, there are lots of people that struggle with these feelings, a lot actually. And what do you do with them? Well, first of all, there is something I've learned many years ago. Fritz Perls, who was the founder of Gestalt therapy, used to say, when you're dealing with somebody who says they're thinking about killing themselves, one of the things you might ask them is, okay, so why haven't you? Now, that's a bit abrupt, and I don't necessarily encourage anybody to say that or ask that, but I want to make the point that he was addressing, which is if somebody's talking about it, there's still something inside them saying, don't do it. Don't do it. If they're talking about it at all, they haven't made that choice to do it yet. So there's something worthwhile to hold on to that they believe is inside them, but they don't know how to reach it and they're looking for help. That's the reason for telling you that. I'm not saying you should ask that question, but just recognize that when somebody's talking to you about it, they haven't decided to do it, but they're thinking about it. So something's worthwhile there. And so one of the things that you might ask them about, which is atypical, not typical at all, is, can you tell me what's good in your life? Can you tell me what are the things that you think are worthwhile that you would really miss? Can you tell me how others might feel? Now, you might, in asking those questions, you might find out there's a lot of depression. There's not a lot that they feel good about. And you'll hear more about the things that they're upset about and what's driving them to even consider these thoughts and feelings. The thing is, you're not an expert. None of us are really experts unless we've been trained in this area. And so you really do want to refer them. And even if you don't refer them at that moment and they are reluctant to make a phone call, I'd suggest if you're a friend, a family member, somebody that loves them, cares about them, wants to help, you call. You express what you heard. You get some advice from the people at this hotline about how you might help. Again, I'll give you the number again. Excuse me. Here we go. 800-800-273-8255. 800-273-8255. So what does help when people talk with you? What does help, whether it's suicide or just some other depressing, upsetting, frustrating, angry, humiliating, ashamed feeling that somebody's expressing, that they're experiencing? How can you help? What is it that you can say or do? Well, this whole emotion roadmap is about that. The reason people make changes, what works for change, is that you have enormous pressure in your current state, in whatever is existing. And obviously, anybody who's contemplating something like suicide is feeling tremendous pressure not to go on. And they're fighting against it. That's why they're talking to you about it. And one of the ways that you can address this, at least in theory, is that one of the ways you can at least address that in theory is to just simply say, hey, if you could see yourself in the future, I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know if it's a week, a month, a year or more. But if you can see yourself in the future being in a happy place, in a safe place, in a psychologically supported place, in a cared about place, where you feel valued and respected, where you feel like you're making a meaningful contribution, not just to yourself, but to others as well. If you can see yourself there, what does that look like for you? What possibly might be the kind of world you want to live in? Where you are experiencing your best version of you? What does that look like to you? What does that feel like to you? What does that sound like to you? What words come to mind? What images come to mind? Where would you be? What would you be doing? Who would you be with? So first, it's like creating a positive image that you ask people to consider, to think about. And then, how do you get there? What is a concrete first step of something that you want to lock in to achieve that? Because that sounds pretty good. Not just to me. Does it sound good to you too? And of course it does, because it's coming from them. And then, of course, all the self-doubt and the maybe self-hate and the shame or whatever it is that's going on comes into play. And they say, no, I can never. Well, your vision sounds great, but you need something concrete to do to start you off in that direction. What could you do? What are some concrete positive steps that you might take? See what they come up with. As part of one of the concrete steps that you might take, and you might suggest they take if it feels right, and I suggest that you do find a way to introduce this anyway, is you call this number, right? This hotline number. You could talk to people who have dealt with this. You're not alone. That's a big misgiving people have. Even though it seems like there's a lot of people feeling this way, they don't talk about it much. Like Doug said, there's not a lot of people talking about this. They're embarrassed to talk about it. So instead of just living inside yourself with these pent-up thoughts of suicide and these, whatever the feelings are about, whether it's feeling hateful toward yourself or ashamed of something you may have done, or someone's betrayed you and you feel like it's not worth living if you can't trust that person or certain people. Whatever it might be, there are things that cause certain feelings to happen, and you want to understand what those things are, and you want to know how to counter them. You want to know how to move forward and past them, how to learn how to let go of them, how to deal with them effectively and move on. And again, there are experts that can help with that. But you can help too, just in talking with somebody who's brought this to your attention, by asking them to think about, if life was good, what does it look like, feel like, taste like, sound like? And how might you get there? And how can I be helpful to you to get there? And who else can be helpful to you to get there? And what about calling this number to help you get people to help you get there? Well, okay, that's the direction I didn't necessarily intend to go this morning, but I'm glad that Doug asked the question, because I know there's a lot of people in today's world feeling very upset about multiple things. These horrific mass shootings, obviously, the families that have lost loved ones. Is it worth going on and living in a world that where this could happen? Where is God in all of this? All those questions come to mind when you've lost a loved one to senseless violence. So how do you cope? How do you cope? How do you help others to cope? I mean, those are really important things. And this emotion roadmap, how do you feel? What would be ideal to feel instead of how you're feeling? How do you get from how you're feeling to what would be ideal to feel? What can we understand about how emotions work? And what can we understand about how emotions work for you? And of all the possible ways you might get to better feelings, more ideal feelings, what actual strategies are you able to implement? And are you willing to implement? What are you feeling? What would be ideal to feel? What might be some ways that you could get from what you're feeling to what's ideal to feel? What are you actually able and willing to do? That's the roadmap. That's how it works. So if you got something you want to call me about and talk to me about, specifically if you're dealing with some tough things, challenging things, 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.